This is Axis and Allies 1942 setup on the anniversary edition, playing with a house rule called Hard Up, where everything costs 3 times their original purchase price. Ouch! And I've realised that I've made a mistake from the end of the last video, not a big mistake. I forgot to mention what China did. Well, they only had enough pennies, or rather regions on this version, to purchase 1 infantry that they put into Shanghai, figuring out of the way there is going to be annoying for the Japanese to get to, especially with the Russians now coming through from Manchuria. They can start being a bit of a pest, as the Chinese often are in these bigger versions. I didn't do a flyby either end of last turn. I don't know what I was thinking. So, over in the Pacific here, that is where the Americans now sit with their very depleted navy. They are probably going to want to go back home with their battleship rather than losing that. We'll see if the Japanese do allow that to happen. In mainland Europe, here is the strength of the Russians on their western border versus the Germans on their eastern border. It's looking like the Germans may attack there. However, different story in the German central. They want to keep hold of their capital. There's plenty of infantry in there, 8 I think. Plus with 3 fighters and a bomber, do they attack and try and get France? Or do they try and smash the hell out of that fleet just there and cut off any kind of resupply? That I think may be a better plan. We'll see how it plays out. Well, as predicted, the Japanese didn't let the Americans retreat safely. They took their bomber that was in Kangsu and 2 fighters from Fukane and have attacked the battleship, taking the battleship out without a loss themselves. That's expensive for the Americans, but it was expensive for the Japanese last turn. They've left their bomber here on the Japanese island and have bought themselves 2 submarines to start trying to regain some kind of control over in the Pacific. They're also starting a campaign of moving units back up from India, back towards the north of China, because they don't want these Russian troops to make too much of a headway in there. So there's gentle persuasion going on there, maybe even trying to sign a pact with the Russians. They don't come any further forward. China, they're sitting there pretty. They're going to be a whack-a-mole pain in the bottom if we don't get to them anytime soon. Next up will be the Russians. I was hoping to sing Russian praises at the end of turn 4. However, their turn hasn't worked out as well as we'd hoped. There were 2 infantry and an artillery unit in here and a bomber in Russia Central. They were going to try and do a little spoiler attack. They've worked out pretty well with their spoilers up to this point in time. Infantry artillery versus 3 tanks, and the bomber came over. Basically, only 1 hit was done on the tanks, and that was by the weaker units. The 3 tanks fired back and, well, they got 3 hits. So that attack that was going to be just trying to blunt the Germans, to withhold them a little bit, hasn't worked out well. They do, however, have had enough money to purchase 2 infantry this turn, which has gone straight into Moscow, and they've got enough pennies to buy 3 infantry on the next turn, should they still be alive. That really will be up to the Germans to see whether they attack really hard. Sorry, I'm distracted because I just realised that one of the Italian tanks there has the designation of number 46. In fact, it is VR 46. It was randomly plucked out from my tray of Italian pieces. VR 46, Valentino Rossi, who's making his last appearance in MotoGP in Italy this weekend at the Misano Grand Prix. It caught me out, that one. Next up will be Germany. Look out, if you were an Axis supporter, you are in for a treat. If you are rooting for the Allied, it's a tale of woe, I'm afraid. The Germans were extremely belligerent and clever in turn 4, and they, at the times when they needed to be brave, were brave. They continued battles that a lesser country would maybe have pulled off from. They took their tank units from eastern Poland and from eastern Ukraine and from Russia and from Belarus, sorry, and they moved all into Russia Central itself. Yeah, there was a bunch of infantry getting involved too, and here is the tale of woe from that affair. It was an even battle, round 1. 5 infantry lost their lives on the first turn. On turn number 2, just 2 German casualties versus 4, including the Russian artillery. On the third round of the battle, just 1 artillery was lost by the Germans and 2 tanks from the Russians, which left just 2 Russian tanks in the battle, and one German guy lost his life rolling in there. So Moscow has fallen. More importantly, they get these spondulies. The spondulies are probably the most important part for this particular playthrough. Now, the Germans got in there without using their air cover. They were a little bit afraid of the one anti-aircraft unit that was in there. Obviously, that's now become a German unit in this type of game. They used their aircraft a little bit more wisely, taking it from Germany 1-2 spaces into sea zone number 7, where the British Expeditionary Fleet were. They also used their small fleet that was up in sea zone 5 through 6 into sea zone 7 to use those as the horrible term cannon and fodder. Here's the result of the battle. Brilliant rolling by Germany in the first roll. Took out 4 units, plus put the battleship on its side, losing just the sub themselves. Yeah. Round 2, Germany lost a destroyer rather than a cruiser from the Brits. The battleship finally went down on turn 3, Germany losing their cruiser, and obviously the 3 transport ships that were in there have now been lost. The force that's in France, well, they've been cut off. This now needs one massive tidy up by me. The German buy was in artillery to go with the infantry to give them some bark to go with their bite, and I think they are going to be eating chunks out of the Allied forces on next turn. What will the Brits do? How they respond? I think it's with their tail between their legs, and well, where do they go now? Well, it's been a sobering experience for the UK forces and a solemn day for them. They have made a couple of attacks, but they have made no purchases, reasoning that they're not sure what's going to happen with an Axis attack on them. So save their IPCs up, see what they're going to need to buy next time. They have tried to persuade Germany in some respects. They put their bomber from the UK over to the factory and took the maximum 6 damage onto that factory after Germany had repaid some of the damage from last time, allowing them to place their artillery and infantry, which they'd purchased. However, they took one fighter that was in the France region, across 2 spaces into Sea Zone 5 and destroyed the German transport that was there and flew back to the UK. The second one tried to go it alone versus a German destroyer and transport, and unfortunately the destroyer beat the aircraft. So Britain have lost a fighter. They've also brought their destroyer around finally from the Cape of Good Hope. It's got itself around to somewhere where it can be useful later on. It's having a blocking role. How long that lasts for, we do not know. But they are kind of giving up on France. It's an expensive give up. There's 2 tanks, 3 artillery, there's anti-aircraft in there, and there's 5 or 6 infantry in there. They're going to try and hang on as long as they can. If the UK had bought transport this turn to try and ship some guys over, I can see it getting destroyed by German air wing. I think the best thing that the Brits can do is hang on in here, absorb an attack from Italy, which is bound to come straight away in the next turn, and then from Germany in the go after, and see what we're left with and try to do some sort of rebuild in the UK. but I think it looks like Germany are now establishing or re-establishing a lock on the continent. Next up will be Italy. Well, Italy have withstood an enormous amount of pressure being put upon them by the German government to invade France. They said, no, we are a supporting country, especially as our IPC value of 6 would be a tasty target should an attack into France fail, and it probably would do because Italy only had 5 infantry there. There's 7 now. They brought 2 this turn. And they are facing a fairly reasonable chunk over in France, even though we think that's going to be a losing cause. However, they did try to help the Axis attack, rather. They took their small fleet that was here in Sea Zone 14, moved that forward 2 sea zones to where the British destroyer was and destroyed it. Of course, it was the obvious move to make. The slightly less obvious move, well, they're going to try to make some money grabs of their own now, Italy. This tank that's been moving backwards and forwards from Italy to, I think it was Egypt initially, back to Bulgaria, Romania to help out the Germans when it looked like the Russians were coming through, has now gone back across to Egypt. It is going to start a roam around Africa. It is going to start picking up IPCs and helping the Axis out in a financial way. If we can put a few more units on board, all is well and good. That is the end of the Italian turn. They've done very little, but it's been very important. Let's see what the Americans will do on both sides of the map next turn. As often is my wont when playing this game, especially when playing solo, you have to sit back and reassess sometimes. So I've had the night off, I've not played this during the evening time, it's now the following day, and I'm looking at the Americans with a global view to the game position. Reason being, you will be able to count if I pull right back and you can squint your eyes very tightly. The Axis currently have 10 of the 13 victory cities required for the projected win, which is what we're going to go for. They need to get France, which has the block of Americans and mainly British in there. They need to get Caucasus with a minor amount of Russian infantry holding it in place. That's not going to last more than 2 seconds when the Germans start rolling. And they need to get either Australia with a couple of Brits or perhaps the Hawaiian Islands. So we're on the American turn. Why am I saying this? Well, the Americans are the pivotal point in this game. They are going to buy with 30 IPCs, 1 fighter. It's going to go over to this side of the map. We'll do that in a second, because we've got to do the movements first and give you an idea of my thinking around this. We could try to block off the Axis forces in the Pacific by moving this small fleet of people back from the Atlantic side over to the Pacific side. The problem with that being Sea Zone 10 is within reach of the Italians, and that's as far as this fleet can get. Italians being here in 12, 1, 2, they drop in. So there is no real way, let me put the camera down, there is no real way of the Americans taking a fleet over to the Pacific from the Atlantic with any kind of safety. So it does look like an Axis win is very much on the cards. What we're going to do to try to stymie that is, and I've already rolled it, the 2 American bombers here in the UK, one has bombed the factory in Germany and did a 5 IPC damage. That's now been out to, I think it's about 19 damage. Again, it's going to be expensive for the Germans, but the Germans did get the Russian money from last turn, so they are pretty flush at the moment. The second American bomber came over and bombed the factory in Karelia. Now, there's no units there, apart from 1 anti-aircraft gun, because the only thing I think that the Americans can do, in terms of them being the one of the major players in this scenario is to try to hang on to France with their limited units. If they bring more sea units over, which is only 2 transport and 1 destroyer, they can bring a block in, but again they can't reinforce, and this Italian navy that is down here can move into Sea Zone 7 and pretty much have fun destroying that fleet, which completely ruins any kind of American involvement. So instead, damn. Apologies for interruption, that was a telephone call that I had to answer. I think we were at the Americans over here. What we're going to do with these guys, instead of taking them into a danger sea zone, we're going to take them up from Sea Zone 1, 2, 3 and take them way, way up north. Now, they are still vulnerable to an attack from the German air fleet, which could fly over there. There's no navy that can get up to there. If they take infantry, 3 infantry, 1 artillery on their 2 boats, they're not going to invade Norway. Now, by not invading Norway, they're staying in the water. This aircrew could come in and have a bash, but we think the aircrew from Germany's better idea would be to attack France and try to get France and try and grab that city. Germany are hoping, America are hoping to be able to come around and take Karelia, which is why they've preemptive bombed the factory here to slow down the amount of units that Germany can build in here straight away, or at least it's going to cost them to rebuild the factory before they can put units in, to try to grab back a victory city and try to buy them some time. Really, that is America's attempt. This go is buying time and hanging on desperately, I think, is really the key for them. Over in the Pacific, similar kind of spoiler move, if you can call it a spoiler move. They are buying themselves 1 fighter plane. They are moving these 2 guys on the boat down to the Hawaiian Islands, and the carrier is moving down into the Hawaiian Islands, and so is the submarine. It can all meet up in this season as a central core. It can, from here, go 1, 2 and reach the Australia, where we think the Japanese are going to strike next, because their transport is already in place to come across. It's going to take them a couple of goes here, but we think that is the best move by the Americans, is to try to get some sort of lock somewhere, some sort of haven where they can prevent the Axis from taking victory cities. Once again, the bomber is going to move back as well to the Hawaiian Islands. That's a no-brainer move to help out with this attack stroke defence of Australia, depending on who gets there first and what damage is done. So that is the end of the American turn. I should do the Chinese moves all off camera because it's a very simple thing and it's not important really right now to the flow of this game. I think that will end video number 4. Video number 5, I believe, may be the last video in this series. We shall see how it pans out. Till next time, be cool.